Our teachers, whether we meet them in a formal educational setting or whether we just meet them in life, are the first people other than our parents really that leave indelible marks on our lives that really change who we are and help to form who we are. I come from a family of educators, so I was really thrilled to be able to come and share with you. If I hadn't ended up being a writer, I think I would have been a teacher, but I became a writer because a teacher made a writer out of me, but writers end up being teachers more than you'd think, so I feel like I belong here with all of you. If not for teachers, one of those special teachers who made a teacher out of me probably would never have become my teacher at all. So my story in many ways is a story of education. It was actually, though, a very special lady named Miss Crackhart who first gave me the idea of becoming a writer. In my family, there were some great storytellers and some great letter writers, and back in that day, sometimes we recorded our letters on reel-to-reel tapes and sent them back and forth between family members. But the people in my family were farmers and computer programmers and shopkeepers, and nobody really thought a writer was something you would be for a living. And I might never have thought of it either, to tell you the truth, if it hadn't been for Miss Crackhart. I was a shy transfer student coming into a new school halfway through the first grade, and she was my first grade teacher. And this school happened to be in Northborough, Massachusetts. We moved around a lot when I was young, and we had come there from Florida. So it felt very, very foreign to me, this whole concept of putting on 8 layers of clothing and galoshes and all these things. And there were hooks in the hallway in that school, and you would go to your hook and you would strip all that stuff off and leave it there on your hook and your galoshes along the hall to go in. And what happened very, very often, because it's so snowy there, is we had to stay in for indoor recess, which for me was an absolutely mortifying concept. Having come from Florida, I had very little experience with indoor recess, and I was absolutely mortified because what you had to do at indoor recess was ask somebody to play a board game with you or something. And I was terrified by that because I thought the person would say no, and then I would just die of embarrassment or something right there. And so what I was doing one day when I was fairly new in this school was I was sitting there writing a story because you had to do something during indoor recess. So I was writing a story, and Miss Crackhart came up and she started to read the story over my shoulder. And she was saying things like, "Oh, this is a great story, and I wonder what happens next." And I was writing faster. Because, I was kind of a shy kid who flew under the radar. I had been in a private school before that, and I'd had a grouchy nun for a teacher. And I really, really did not want to be noticed by her. But Miss Crackhart was being so encouraging that, I was thrilled that she had noticed me, and I hurried and I finished that story, and I don't remember anything about the story except at the end of it was something about a boy going in a bear cave. And for years I couldn't have told you too much about that moment, except I remembered Mrs. Crackhart taking those pages and straightening them on the desk and saying to me, "You are a wonderful writer." And I thought, I am a wonderful writer. And it's funny how you have those little defining moments in life, but that was one of mine. I never ever thought of myself the same way again after that. I went from being a shy transfer kid who didn't quite fit in and couldn't work up the guts to get to know anybody, to being a wonderful writer. And then Miss Crackhart did the most amazing, wonderful thing. She took that story and she read it to the rest of the class. And I remember when she finished that story and the boy went into the bear cave, every kid in that class, all those kids I was too shy to get to know, looked at me and said, "What happens next?" And I was hooked. That went from being the end to the end of chapter 1. And I would write stories, and Miss Crackhart would share them with the class, and she was the most fascinating teacher. She left something so permanent in my life, and I was only in her classroom for a little while, but she left something really permanent and really good with me. And that's a pretty big deal when you think about it, to leave something permanent with somebody that's good and that stays forever. She taught me to believe in myself and never to underestimate the power of a good story. Sometimes when I should have just told the truth, I'm sure. But she loved books and writing, and she always had us performing little puppet shows and plays and things in her class, and we were always doing something fascinating. That was the contrast, because I had come out of a school where I didn't like school, and I was afraid of the teacher, and it was a horrible thing for me the day I figured out that when you do this, the teacher can still actually see you. She's just seeing you with your hand up over your eyes. It was horrible when I figured that out in the nuns' classroom, because then there was just no escape. But in Miss Crackhart's classroom, every day was a new adventure, and we were always doing interesting things. And for years, I couldn't have told you whether she was a young teacher or an old teacher. I couldn't have told you anything about her, but I could have told you what we did in that class, and I could have told you that she told me I was a wonderful writer. And I tried years later, after the book started being published, to look her up, and I couldn't find her. But miracle of miracles, a reporter in Northborough, Massachusetts, picked up the story when I dedicated my third book, The Language of Sycamores, to her, and found Miss Crackhart. And I was able to thank her and tell her what an effect she had on my life in the first grade in those few months.